Now, the national average is closer to $200, maybe $240 per native household per year. That's based on some other calculations that I did. Closer to home, there was a study by the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill a few years ago, looked, again, specifically at Latino immigrants in the state of North Carolina, found that they contribute an additional $756 million per year in state taxes, but cost the state something like $817 million. So the net burden due to these immigrants is about $61 million per year. Now that works out to be about $102 per Latino resident. Now, again, there are more native residents than there are Latino residents in the state of North Carolina. And if you frame that, or you calculate that in terms of native residents, it works out to a few dozen bucks per year. So we in North Carolina appear to be bearing an extra burden of state and local taxes of about, $25 or $35 per year. Again, that's a burden, that's a cost. It's a cost imposed upon us by others, and yet it's just not very big. Besides, these immigrants generate a consumer spending impact, not factored into state finances, but just into the rest of the economy, a consumer spending impact of over $9 billion per year, and spin-off employment of nearly 90,000 jobs. In fact, given the role that these folks are playing in construction and furniture and other industries, it is a good question to ask. Did Latino immigration into North Carolina actually soften the blow of the decline of the textile industry as a big employer? Now, I also think that this kind of question is not the right kind of question. Yes, it's true. I think we've established that immigrant populations, and in particular illegal immigrant populations, impose a burden on the rest of society. It's only fair to say so. But this is the kind of question or the kind of study that begs too many other questions. It sort of reminds me of when people look at the cost of smoking or this or tardy, they calculate the cost of various things on the U.S. economy. Now I've often wondered, well, okay, you calculate the cost of smoking because you don't like smoking. Well, but no one's ever calculated the cost of, say, stupidity on the U.S. economy. And let me tell you, I bet it costs us a lot more than people smoking. Well, similarly here, it's important for us to remember that there is another sector of society, another segment of the population that imposes huge costs, much more than immigrants, imposes huge costs on us, even down to the level of the family. This is a segment of society, a portion of the population that has entire county agencies devoted to it. It has entire government bodies focused on that segment of the population. I'm talking about our children. I don't know about your children, but my 11-month-old baby has not contributed financially to my family yet, and I'm waiting for my payment. The fact is that we don't mind that children don't contribute financially to the economy because we know that they're going to grow up, aside from just loving children, we know that children are going to grow up and become taxpayers. They're going to grow up and become valued members of society and of the economy, and so it's okay. But the thing is, studies show that the same thing is true after the passage of a generation with immigrant populations. In fact, often the second generation of immigrant populations is better educated and earns higher incomes than native-born counterparts. Now, finally, one of the other issues that we can talk about is what we need to do about this. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to have sensible immigration policy, and I don't think really anyone does. I don't think even supporters and proponents of immigrants think there needs to be a sensible policy. And the thing is, for many years we have had essentially an absence of a policy. And now you find millions of people in this country caught in the middle between the absence of a policy and efforts to impose a draconian policy. And the thing is, we could put together a sensible policy from this point on using the insights of economics, and it would be pretty cheap. Unfortunately, there's an American tendency to want to use gadgets and technology to solve any problem. We see this in the way our airports have been transformed in the wake of 9/11, when some studies have shown that we might have been able to stop that more cheaply. We're spending a lot of money on security that maybe we don't need to. Similarly, when we think about Latino, in particular Mexican immigration, we want to put up a big fence. We want technology. We want surveillance systems on that border to lock down that border in a way that historically it never was. Well, that's kind of expensive. But the thing is, we can harness economic incentives and do that more cheaply. Because after all, immigrants come here because they're hired. One of the things we're seeing in the midst of this recession here in the US in late 2008 is we're seeing less immigration, less illegal immigration, because there are fewer jobs here in this country. But when the economy returns, we will have this renewed incentive for immigrants to come here because there will be jobs, or at least more jobs here once again. But the problem is, from the standpoint of immigration policy, that employers do not face any kind of significant risk, any kind of reasonable punishment or fine from hiring undocumented workers, and maybe they should. But the problem is, for a few decades, we have employed a government policy that seems to believe that all regulation is bad, all inspections are bad. We have decimated the ranks of inspectors for workplace safety, consumer protection, all sorts of medications, all sorts of areas of our economy that need to have some oversight, most of us believe, have been abandoned by a few decades of an ideology that says that regulation and inspection and enforcement are somehow drags on the economy. The effect these days is, for example, we seem to be outsourcing our product safety inspections to China. I'd just as soon have my government do it, but maybe that's just me. Well, we have also dramatically reduced the number of worksite inspectors, those who go on work sites to determine whether employees, whether the workers are in fact documented. In 1999, the government fined only 417 businesses for hiring undocumented workers. So that was 417 fines in 1999. But as low as that may be, in 2004, that number had fallen to 3. 3 employers were fined in all of 2004 for hiring undocumented workers. If there are only 3 across the entire country, there is effectively no deterrent to employers failing to do their job of ensuring valid documentation. All we need to do is repopulate the ranks of these worksite inspectors, and it would be a lot cheaper to do than building a highly technologized fence along our border. Well, the bottom line is the following. To a general audience, what I'd say is that there may be valid ethical and national security justifications to restrict illegal immigration. I'm here to talk about the economics. For the most part, I'm not here to talk about national security or other things. But it's very hard to make an intellectually honest argument in favor of restricting immigration that is based on economics. Economics is something that we use a lot to justify the public policy position that we prefer, but in this case, it just doesn't work. If immigration is to be restricted dramatically from this point on, the only reasonable and intellectually honest way of doing it is to base it on these other factors about which I'm not talking today. But to this audience, I would also add that the absence of valid economic justification for restricting immigration makes it even more important to remember our moral teachings. And with that, I thank you for your attention.